Hey guys, welcome back to another episode of In-Depth Angling. I'm excited for this one because we're going to be taking a look at and breaking down the catfish spawn from water temperature, patterns, locations, and tips to help you catch more and bigger catfish this year out on Lake of the Ozarks. Be sure to hang with us till the end because I'm going to go over a few spots out there on the lake as well. But before I go any further, if you're new to this channel or have seen some of our videos before in the past and aren't subscribed yet, please consider subscribing so you don't miss out on the new videos that we're making this year designed to help you guys catch more and bigger fish out on the water. You definitely don't want to miss out. Alright, let's dive right into this thing. The spawn starts once water temperatures reach the upper 60s to low 70s in the lake after the catfish have finished their pre-spawn phase. If you missed that video, I will have it linked up there in the upper right as well at the end of the video if you guys are interested in checking that out. The ideal peak temperature range for catfish to spawn varies between three species that call the Lake of the Ozarks home. We have channel catfish, which can get up to about 35 pounds in total weight, blue catfish, which get to be fairly sizable. They can reach up to 100 pounds at their maximum growing potential, and flatheads as well over 100 pounds over their maximum growing potential. The channel catfish have a spawning range of about 70 degrees to 85 degrees. It's a little bit warmer than what flathead have. Flathead usually are the first to spawn of the three. They start around the 68, 67 degree range and run into the mid 70s, about 75 degrees. And blue catfish have a more limited range of when they will spawn. They spawn around the 70 to 75 degree mark. During a warm year at the lake, the water temperatures can reach those ranges as soon as mid to late spring and carry into the early and mid summer. But as unpredictable and inconsistent as the weather is in Missouri, the timing of this can change and start either later or earlier depending on the weather that we have in a year. And it's really, like I said earlier, keyed off on to water temperature. The lake will heat up and cool off in different rates throughout. The areas that have more runoff coming into them off of these different arms of the lake where there's different creek inlets up here and up here, like whether that's on the Niangua or it's over here on the Grand Glazed arm or up on the Gravway. Those upper arms, they're shallower overall, they have more sediment, they have more runoff, generally from warmer rains in the spring, and that tends to heat up the water faster. There's also less area there to heat up in the first place. As you can see, indicated by all the blue that's in this section is how much more shallower that channel is. Shallower water heats up and cools off faster, as opposed to down by the dam and in the mid-lake areas where we have 70 to 80, even 100 feet deep channels, and it's very deep and a lot wider. Those will be the areas that take the longest to get into the spawning phase and longest to heat up. Catfish spawn differently than bass or crappie do when they go and fan off a bed and they try to remove the sediment from the bottom with their tail and create like a circle-shaped nest like most fish do in the lake. Catfish are completely different. They don't use this kind of style. They instead use cavities and banks and hollow logs, crevices between boulders, riprap. They make nests in there and they kind of don't really have a fanned out spot or use their tail to create anything. They just kind of find existing structure and will use whatever it is, whether it be old culvert pipe, anything that has a cavity to it. Holes and little caves on the sides of the cliff walls out here on the main channel. There'll be different bigger boulders along some of these areas where there's been old chunks of big rock that have fallen off these cliffs and created little shelves. So you can see here there's different little lines of blue. Different shelf rock usually ends up having holes in them from erosion, and those kind of areas where it'll be spots where they'll end up nesting at, as well as even on points that have got some riprap or really narrow channel wall banks like these coves here. They have very steep contours to them, a lot of bigger rock involved, and those are going to be areas to look for, as well as any kind of laid down trees. Those are key areas to look for and try to catch some of those fish, as well as where there's any kind of old bridge, or anything that has like an old roadbed. Maybe there's like some different rock or some different cavities that they can get around inside that old man-made structure. Those are always good areas that those fish will try to go and try to stead up and spawn at. Riprap's the most common and most obvious. They'll a lot of times spawn closer towards shore. It doesn't always have to be necessarily in the back of a cove. It can be back here, like if this was Lynn Creek Cove, they could spawn back here in the back half or the back third of the cove. There'll also be some spawning out here on the main channel still because they just need a crevice to go into. They don't necessarily need a certain bottom type like pea gravel like other species such as crappie and bass do. The spawning process starts with the male picking a spawning cavity such as a crevice in a rock or a boulder or even like a laydown tree like I mentioned earlier, and getting a female to go and spawn there as well. The female lays her eggs and pretty much gets chased out by the male and leaves. The males stay behind and guard the nest until the eggs hatch, which usually takes around a week or so. give or take a few days depending on water temperature and sunlight. The males can be difficult to catch at this time just because they're so tight into cover or inside of a hole, but if you can get a bait down there to them, they'll attack basically anything that comes near their nest. So they're very, very territorial and aggressive. They're just hard to catch because a lot of times they're wrapped up in some sort of thicker cover. Baits to use for catching catfish vary from species to species on the lake. There's certain baits that work better for one species over another. Flatheads are known for being the most picky of the three. Basically key in on more live bait or really fresh cut bait is what I like to use for them. Stuff like live bluegill and shad are my favorite. Night crawlers will also work for some of the smaller fish or when they're in a more of a finessey, finicky mood, but usually I end up having very good success by using either live shad or live bluegill when trying to target flatheads around any kind of bigger rocky or wooden cover, and they're the fish that goes up and spawns first of the three. Blue catfish can be selective in what they eat, but will scavenge around the bottom unlike flatheads. Blue catfish also have a slot length limit on Lake of the Ozarks. You can't keep them between 26 and 34 inches. They got to be released, and that was stated in 2014, so before that everybody was catching them, and they decided to change the rules so that they can keep more of the trophy size blue cats in the lake. Don't really know if that's helped out a whole lot yet or not, but time will tell. Try cut or live bluegill, shad, night crawler, chicken liver, or stink bait for the bigger blue cats on the lake. In my experience, I have had the best luck with bigger cut shad or cut bluegill. Channel catfish in the lake are really known for their habit to scavenge the bottom and be the most aggressive of the three species, often being caught by anglers targeting other species with artificial lures. Good baits to use for channel catfish include stink bait, chicken liver, old cut bait, night crawlers. Will catch you large numbers of those channel catfish on the lake. The bigger fish tend to be caught on some more of the cut bait like the cut shad, shad guts, and other cut bluegill. They will kind of go for more of the bigger baits and things. So you can catch quite a few catfish out of here, the channel cats. Not uncommon to get a couple 5 to 10 pounders in that range. I caught one a few years ago that was over 30, and that was really a trophy fish for channel catfish, and that was caught on a live bluegill. One of my favorite techniques to catch catfish on the lake is by setting dock and bank lines overnight with bigger baits like bluegill and shad. You can do this with a bungee cord on your dock, and it'll kind of fight the fish for you overnight, and you can go down there and check it in the morning, or tree limbs overhanging the water along some of these different banks and things. So like if you have a steeper bank and there's some deeper water nearby, you can usually find some trees that overhang along some of these cliffs or inside these pockets right off the cliffs over here, or you can find some of the steeper channel wall banks that are in a cove. They will usually have some sort of overhanging limbs that will be strong enough for you to tie on a bank line and hang it over off the side of the bank during the evening or low light periods. Those catfish will kind of look for some food up in the shallows a little bit more, and whenever they have low light, they feel a little bit more comfortable going up shallow. So that's usually when the bigger ones go out to hunt as well. Use some of the bigger baits on those, and you'll catch some really nice sized catfish. Another great way to catch lots of fish as well as cover water would be three-belly swivels and drift fishing, and use the wind to kind of drift you along the bottom and keep your bait up off the bottom by using a three-way swivel, which will have a weight pegged down to one of the swivels and your bait on a hook sitting out off of the bottom suspended so you don't get snagged as it drags, and that usually will get you bit and also help you figure out where those fish are at if you're uncertain. Jugs can be used for suspended catfish throughout the lake. You can set them up in a cove, set them up out in the main channel. They have different regulations on different kinds of jugs and what you can and can't use, but on really busy days, if the fish are biting and you're jug fishing, you'll have a hard time just keeping up with trying to get your bait loaded up and going and hooking the next fish when they're out and feeding. One of the bigger keys to catching those active fish and getting on a hot bite like that where you're chasing down jug after jug or reeling in fish after fish is being aware of the bait fish in the area. The bigger and more active catfish will tend to be around the area where there's still bait fish, and so if you're in an area where you're not seeing any shad on your graphs or you're not seeing them on the surface, because they will be on the surface this time of year as we're getting more and more into the late spring and into the summer, those fish are more active and they'll be cruising along the top. Usually just below those schools is where the catfish will usually hang out if they're actively feeding. Just a key tip to keep you in an area where the bigger and more aggressive fish are going to be at. The fish that are in more of a passive to neutral feeding mood are going to be in areas where there aren't as many bait fish at. You can still catch those fish, but they're not usually the areas where you're going to have a really hot bite or be able to take advantage of fish after fish and big schools of catfish looking to feed. Underneath bridges are always a good area to go and target some of these fish as well. The different pylons give them structure, as well as the riprap that's usually underneath some of these bridges are great. These main lake points along and through here are awesome as well. So are along some of these big bluffs and areas where there's a lot of current that runs through when the dam's generating water. The shad will kind of get pulled out here towards the main channel more often than not. during those times where there's a lot of current running through the lake, and those catfish will pull out there as well and be feeding just below those schools of shad. So keeping an eye on that will help you be more productive out on the water and finding the active fish that want to feed. Main intersections in the main channel as well off these points. Excellent locations for you guys to go and try as well. When there's going to be any kind of current going on, those females will kind of slide off and be looking for food actively. Those males will be in the nesting spots. Generally, there's a lot of bigger rock around these areas where those channels meet, because the old rivers used to meet there. There used to be a lot of current. If you can get into some of the more of those active fish, if there's bait fish up there, those are going to be your areas you're generally going to catch a lot more bigger fish and have more success out on the water with. Further up here on some of these channel arms, there's also a little bit more limitation in what cover is available in depth range. Sometimes these flats over here will be producing some fish. Their old wintering holes are right off of these cliffs and everything, and in these different pockets where you can see there's all that white right there, and there's a shallow area right next to it. Those are going to be areas I'm going to target. The shallow areas of the channel, they'll actually kind of sit off in the middle sometimes too. If there's a different hole or something for them to use, like out here it's only 7-10 foot deep. If there's any kind of structure out there, an old stump that's hollowed out, or some bigger rocks that are down there in a cluster, they can spawn in that as well. So it's not a one size fits all for out there a whole lake. The lake's got different characteristics on it based on different arms and different sections of the arms. The upper areas are generally a little bit more muddy and murky, and that can be good for some days, especially on the sunny days. Those catfish are a little bit more active, it seems like, than the areas where there's a lot more clear water. I think that's just something that they're more prone to feed in low light conditions or at night, but that's something to keep in mind. These are all great spots you guys can go and use. Do trial and error to find them. Keep an eye on where the bait fish are, and you should be able to find active fish nearby. Thank you for watching. If you enjoyed this video, leave a thumbs up down below, and I will keep doing and adding more catfish content to the channel. Good luck out there and tight lines, and we'll catch you on the next one.